guys, it's Sugar and my husband Jeff.
Hello.
And we were just going to talk about, because I know in our last podcast we mentioned that we were looking at Ghost in the Shell. Mm-hmm. But Jeff wanted me to watch the movie first, the live action movie, before we watched the anime. So we wanted to explain, obviously I am new to the whole thing. Jeff would be rewatching the animated version. But we were going to start talking about the live action first and then get into the original content, so to speak.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because most people I know who would have been watching Ghost in the Shell would have had the original anime experience first.
Right.
So they would be viewing the live action through that lens.
Right.
Whereas
I was forced. No, I was kidding.
You were in the lucky position in some ways to view the live action movie first. And you hadn't read the manga, you hadn't watched any of the movies, you hadn't seen any of the animated series, so you were coming to the live action through fresh eyes. And I thought, that's really unique, because I don't know anybody who normally would be watching that, who this would be their first introduction to Ghost in the Shell. Right.
And it's just been one of those things where it just happened where I hadn't watched it, kind of like Akira, Neon Genesis, any of those really. Evangelion. And so last night we watched it. And we watched both, one after the other. It was a long night.
Wasn't that bad? It's the anime isn't as long as I remembered it, because I thought the anime was like closing in on around an hour and 50 minutes or something. It turned out to be only 85.
I can understand why you thought it was longer, because we'll get into it, but just the fact that there is an animated series with it and the fact that it's pretty heavy. But let's get into the live action. What were your thoughts? What were some things that you...
Well, it had been a long time since I'd watched the anime. Right. And so as things were happening, and you were like, did this happen? And I was like, I think something kind of like that maybe happened, but I don't really remember.
Yeah.
So it had been, at least 10 years since I had watched the anime. And so, the movie from 1996. So, I enjoyed it for what it was. I can understand why people disliked it as an adaptation, because it definitely changes a few key things about the original.
But even before we get into the adapting it, I want you to talk about looking at it, say, because you said you didn't remember the original very well. What about it made it a good movie or a mediocre movie from your perspective? Acting like you hadn't seen the original. Then we'll talk about the adaptation.
I think when I first watched it, I would have hazarded a 6.5 or 7. I enjoyed a lot of the special effects, with exception to the very end. It felt like
the CG was bad.
Just at the end, though.
That's what I mean.
Everything, it felt to me like they needed maybe another month of post-production, and they didn't get that time.
I don't know why, it made me really mad. Again, it would be dipping into the adaptation part, but even that I can get into after. But with the movie, it seemed like they did all this CG for the city and made all this kind of, can I call it glamour shots of the koi, of these geisha, of all these things, and they spent all this time so they'd have something to put in the trailer, and then the last bit they're like, just put it together, I don't care what it is, sort of thing.
I guess I feel like they ran out of time. And
I don't know.
That's one of the things that kind of sucks about it being, a studio production, and you have deadlines to hit. It felt a little bit like they just kind of ran short on time, and so they legitimately looked at the final sequence of the movie, and they were like, this isn't the most important part. There's a lot of explosions and whatnot. We can hide certain things behind.
Right.
We'll just, if we don't have the time, we would rather get the more interesting stuff as great as it can be. The action, it is what it is.
Right. But I found with the live action, there were other problems I had where any of the text on the screen was rather small. And
we have a smaller television.
It's not that small. You should still be able to see it from a couch.
Yeah, I mean,
sit up close to it. Give me a break. It's on the other side of the room. And like by other side of the room, I don't mean we have a big space. Like it's literally
It's
maybe
like
like
7 feet.
7-ish feet across. And like for like me to be like kind of spoiler, we both have glasses, and it's the fact that we should still be able to read it pretty easily. And it was just like very small for most of the print. I found it really confusing why, for example, they would have it vexed me because the live action was using English, which is fine because there was a whole kind of thing about it being whitewashing and so forth. And then they have characters that speak in Japanese, and then they had subtitles, and I'm like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just have everyone English then? That seems to be like such a...
I believe that the actor who was playing that character is like a very recognizable, big time Japanese actor,
That's
and
fine.
he doesn't speak English. So they wanted him portraying this character, but he doesn't speak English very well. So
I get it, but,
they
like,
subtitled that.
I get
That
it.
didn't bug me as much.
It bugged me because it felt like they were trying to satisfy fans by being like, oh, look, we kept the Japanese aspects of keeping it kind of in the Japanese neighborhood and then having some of these people speak Japanese. Where it's like, if either you're doing it all or none. Kind of like, I thought of, maybe it's just because we'd watched Shin Godzilla a couple weeks ago. And it's like, it was all, you had the option to change it to dub. But the whole thing...
We didn't know that when we...
But that's fine.
We started it, and it just started
with
Japanese
subtitles. We're like,
English
okay.
Subtitles. We're like, okay, I mean, that's fine.
And that's
do that
the
all
thing.
time.
It's like, I wish they would either commit to all English or all Japanese, because it's like you're picking and choosing what you want to keep. And it's just like, if you wanted to have it Japanese, why wouldn't you get a Japanese person to play her? And like, oh my god, like not even comparing yet. Scarjo's character, like, I find she was so... Watching her move on screen was really annoying because she was walking like, excuse my language, but like a pole was shoved up her ass. She was walking really weird. Like, part of her wanted to act robotic and part of her was trying to act human. And I didn't like that about her character.
I think I think you're supposed to feel a little like... You're supposed to watch her and you're supposed to feel a little like, well, that's kind of weird because her creation, and I think we can safely say we're just going to talk spoilers. Like, there's going to be spoilers.
There's spoilers.
So
there's no way around it.
Her being essentially, a robot or whatever you want to, like, having a robotic body with a human brain inside as the character.
Screw it. We'll mix the adaptation and the anime in a minute if we have to get into.
But yeah, and so I think that she actually did a fairly good job of showcasing, like, her human brain isn't necessarily always, 100% incommunicado with her body. But
when you
it
watch,
didn't really bug me too much.
When you watch the anime, when comparing characters, she is so boring in comparison. Like, she moves so beautifully, like, in the anime. And yes, it is a drawing, I get it. Like, she moves a lot nicer. She looks more human, even though she's more robotic. And, like, she doesn't walk funny to me. She walked normally. She has, like, charisma. She has, like, this sass to her, which I wish they would have brought to the script. Because that makes her all the more interesting, which shows that, yes, like, her ghost, her soul has that still. It's not just like, I am talking sort of thing and I am flat as a board. Like, that's the kind of, like, display I got from Scarlett Johansson when she was playing this role. It was just very like, ugh.
It's a very different it's a different Motoko role. Like, it is a different adaptation, I would say. And so Scarlett Johansson, I give her credit for playing the character as it was written for her, as opposed to looking at the source. And she probably did look at the source and was like, okay, this character has a lot of charisma, a lot of self-confidence, a lot of she's a badass. My character in this adaptation doesn't seem to have that. And I
know she can only do with what she's written to be, but I mean in the sense of just...
It was poor writing.
Even if, not blaming her for...
poor writing, just poor writing in comparison.
Well, that's the thing. When I look at what they pulled from the adaptation, like, obviously I haven't watched the series yet. I will, I promise. But just from the movie itself, the movie like made me want to watch the series. Nothing about the movie, like live adaptation, made me want to watch the series.
Because it's an inherently different
like,
story in
well,
a lot of ways.
In some ways, but I mean in the sense like they picked certain scenes from the movie, like the fighting scene, the whole like on the water scene, like the boat scene, and even then they didn't take the good parts of it. The choreography wasn't that great in my opinion in comparison. The underwater scene, she didn't have a freaking tank, so I don't know how she was breathing or anything, and they kind of addressed that in the actual anime movie. It goes into more of her mentality, whereas like the main message to me in the live adaptation was basically about consent more than anything. Whereas when you watch the original, it has all these really heavy messages about what are genes, what are memory, what is a person, what is a brain, what are all these things, and kind of understanding like just in a short amount of time is really heavy. And I'm not saying the live adaptation had to hit on all those things because I found it was very heavy, but like just having more than just being like talking about consent and talking about like her meeting with her old mom and her being a runaway and so forth. I don't know if that's in any of the anime series. I just mean like there could have been better time spent, like especially in the anime movie, the city that they're in isn't like this glorified kind of like, I don't want to say utopia, but like the way they portrayed it in the movie, it was like really wealthy city, very like glorified kind of like Las Vegas-esque, whereas in the movie it's just kind of I wouldn't say a dirty town, but like just a regular Japanese community.
They operate in dirty
areas. Yeah.
And
I wish it would have come off more grungy like that.
Yeah, it's the main fault that I give the live action movie is the fact that they turn what was a very deeply philosophical, political. I don't even know what genre necessarily to turn it into, and then turns it into sort of in an odd way, a generic sort of action mystery movie. And that's not to say that that's bad. I enjoyed, and I
but
feel
I
like
love
you
a mystery.
enjoyed. Yeah.
I do, but like it was okay to watch. But I mean, if you're gonna do a mystery, commit. Like, you know what I mean? Don't be like, well, it's kind of about consent. It's kind of finding your identity. It's kind of about, you know, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Being misled in the sense of like, oh yeah, your life story was this, and we lied to you and all this stuff.
It felt as if they didn't trust a general Hollywood audience. And let's get this out of the way right now. This was a Hollywood adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. This wasn't an art piece. This wasn't an art house piece. This wasn't anything like that. It was definitely made to be a success in the North American market. I can't say, I don't know if it made its money back. I kind of doubt it, given the fact that for the most part the effects were really good. They have good performances throughout in the live action, but yeah, they take away a lot of. We were watching recently, a little while ago, a video on YouTube. I forget who published it, about an active protagonist versus a passive protagonist.
Right.
And it feels to me like that was one of the key differences they made. Whereas in the anime, and you absolutely loved the fact that Motoko and the rest of Section 9 were extremely active. They were
so smart.
They knew what was happening.
That's the thing.
There wasn't who the puppet master was and why he was doing what he was doing was the main mystery, but they were on top of like everything the puppet master was doing. They were keeping up almost stride for stride. And that's active. That's active participation from Section 9. And
the team looks competent. Like the part that I love most is the section where gosh, I forget his name, sorry. Where the human cop from Section 9 goes into the garage and he's like, something's wrong, and he pulls out his computer and he starts figuring things out. And he's like, checks the pressure scales and stuff. And I'm like, they're very aware of when something's off. They're aware that they might be toyed with. They're aware, like when they do the interrogation moment with, because that scene was taken to the live action, where, you know, the puppet master took control of a person. And like when they're very aware that this is when happening, there's no surprise in the fact that this keeps happening a lot, and they're trying to like, you know, bring him back and be like, we're sorry this happened. like, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, you know, all this stuff.
We'll try to do what we can.
Yeah,
but
we'll
we
try
don't
to
have
do
the
what we can to
technology
help you.
bring back your
Yeah.
memories.
Whereas in the movie, they were surprised. It seemed like everyone was just kind of new at their job. Like,
It was very
weird.
reactive. They were reacting to what was happening around them. They were passive as opposed to being active in the process.
And that's the thing. I feel like it could have been more successful and actually had a possibly, if they ever wanted to, have a lineup for another movie. If they'd had it seem like that's what I'm getting so mad about the live adaptations. It doesn't seem for the fans. It seems for Hollywood, and the fans are the ones that are coming to these in full swing. That's why I think a lot of the superhero movies had been doing so well, because all the nerds like us had been going and watching and being impressed by what we're seeing. Not all of it's accurate. Like, our friends get together and we bitch about X-Men sometimes, but like stuff like that, because we're huge nerds and we get into comics
take a look
and stuff.
at when X-Men is being successul, it is because they're staying true to the originals, and they aren't,
and they're doing enough to make us happy.
New crap, essentially.
Right.
But that's part of the reason why when we were talking about it in our most recent podcast, and about how I said, and so many people specifically said, this would be so hard to do a live action adaptation of, in a way that would have felt genuine, and that it would have brought something unique to the table. 25 years later, and they still didn't necessarily get... They didn't have the technology, the special effects to really push what they were trying to showcase sometimes.
Like, I feel like they could have almost made it if they'd focused on the right things. Like, I don't mind what they did with the Puppet Master and made him kind of more into like a walking, talking robot, so to speak. And they kind of cover some of his story. But I feel like if they just trimmed down this Hollywood crap of talking about where her mother was and where she was living and having all these fancy shots of buildings and having the part where they're at the shrine and all this other stuff, and this end with the spider, it's just, it looks so much worse than in the anime, and I'm like, that looks so appealing, and it just kind of drove me nuts, where I feel like they could have almost been there. Like, the same with the characters. I should have looked up the names right away, but her second there, Boto, with the eye modifications, like, he was so badass in the anime. Like, I never got that at all from the movie, and I know it's based on people who produce it and writing and all that stuff, but like,
they
reminded me.
fundamentally changed his character.
I know, but I mean, I liked it, and that's what a lot of people like, because like, I instantly thought of Sin City, like one of my favorite movies. The original was like, I could totally see that kind of character being that badass, and they just didn't go there.
That's, again, because they were changing like what.
Yeah.
They're changing the story.
But I don't want it changed.
No, and that's, I will give the live action movie, credit for not doing in some ways not doing the lazy thing and just taking exactly what we had seen from the anime and then just throwing it into live action, because
and
then what's the point?
No, I get that. Like, they could have added something, but like, and they could have shaved down some of the philosophical stuff, but like, keep the core of what made it good. Like, I get the fact that she couldn't be naked because for obvious reasons. I get the skin she had to wear, sort of thing. That's one thing. I get the kind of characters they had, but I wish they would have pushed for them to be closer to the original, because people like seeing these kinds of characters. And like, when I watched the movie, the only characters I was drawn to was kind of like Section 9's leader, who seemed kind of badass. And like, that was the only person I kind of attached myself to, because I was like, he seems really like badass and I want to know more of his story. But other than that, like, other than watching the anime where I got more like, holy, I like this dynamic, I like these people, I like what they do. It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, and you know, there's Section 6, Section 9, how many sections are there? And it just got me more intrigued to watch it, because I'm sure I will watch it now. And it was very, very deep, and it's very thought-provoking, where in the movie, I didn't get that at all, where it's like, okay, being a robot, I got that from every other kind of robotic show, like iRobot and all this other crap, where it's like, excuse my language, but it's like, I'm just getting sick and tired of seeing the same old thing because they want to play it safe. And it's like, if you want to take some name and you want to adapt it, do it properly, because why bother? Like, if you want to make some robotic show, go nuts. Do whatever you want. Don't take this idea and just half-ass it.
There was no reason to, At the end of the day, it doesn't feel like there was any reason to call it Ghost in the Shell. They made enough changes. To be fair, the character that you're talking about, Boto, I actually liked what they did with him in the live action for all the other changes that they were making. I felt like his character, I loved the line, like, "Oh, I'm not pure like you," where he's talking about. It's interesting
But
to
the pure comment is made in the animated series.
I think it was made in the live action, wasn't it?
That's how bad. Like, I don't even remember because I didn't care about his character in the live action.
I liked the fact though that they
But
made
yes,
him
no,
huge...
you're right. It's because when
Yeah.
they're driving down the street, she sees the glitch of the shrine, and then he brings up with the fact of her being more pure. But the fact is,
And
like,
it seems so. I love that the world in which the live action takes place. That's what's seen as purity is almost entirely.
But then again, they take an
engineered.
idea of being pure and then go nowhere with it.
Yeah, I mean that just builds.
They just switch over to the whole idea of consent and the whole idea of AI, which again just takes away from it because like all you're doing. Same with like I'm gonna bitch about it. It's like the same they did with Death Note. I don't know why they made the adaptation. They just pissed all over it. Like I could rant about it in many videos. I'm like, ugh.
This was better than Death Note.
Oh, that's the thing. It was better than Death Note. I'm not even putting them in the same category. I'm just saying, in this sense, I'm getting mad when people are saying, like, it's like somebody taking Full Metal Alchemist and, like, having a show about alchemy and nothing else. And it's like, why? Why would you piss on the thing that I love? Like, it makes me frustrated. And I know there's a live-action Full Metal Alchemist coming out, but I'm...
You know what? It looks like
okay.
it has some promise.
It has promise, but it's always that gut feeling of knowing what's come already. So
yeah.
What has transpired?
What was your opinion of the live action before you had watched the anime?
I thought it was okay. I thought it would be something like, if you're watching, like say you're cleaning around the house and you're like, oh, something's on TV and you played it and you're like, that was all right. Like, it was okay. But the second I watched the original, I was just like, grrr. I was like, I'm so angry because, like, she had all these ideas. She had a personality. She talked about having hope and, like, that's what being under the water was like. Not just, like, it's quiet and it's cold. It's like, there's hope. And I get, like, she talks about, like, her ghost having a voice, which is fine. I can see why they didn't put that more so in the live action because people would be confused. But it was just so much more detail, so much more investment in character, so much more, I just find, like, once again, like Hollywood, where it's just like, you have to have one villain that you're against, and so here's Cutter, you hate him, you know he's gonna be the dick in this episode, rah, 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 rah. It's like, rah, rah, bear. But,
definitely the loss of Section 6 and the loss of all, like, the political intrigue, they tried to shoehorn it in a little bit with Cutter, but they basically just made this generic guy who, they aren't really a person. They're a weapon. They're a weapon for my company. I own them. It's like, okay, we've seen that in RoboCop. We've seen that in literally dozens and dozens of films. Ghost in the Shell didn't necessarily even have the anime. It doesn't necessarily have a villain. It has somebody who's doing bad things, like the Puppet Master. But once you kind of learn what the Puppet Master is and what it was trying to do and how the Puppet Master was originally created, there isn't necessarily justification, but it gives justification for why it was doing what it was doing. It basically was like, and again, big spoilers for the anime. I like the fact that it's literally kind of like an AI that they created. And then he was like, I gained sentience. What's any different between me and any other human?
I love that in the animated movie where he's like, I claim autonomy or whatever. And it's just like, I want kind of protection because I have this higher level of thinking. And I was like, oh, that's such good writing. I was like, I love that.
The fact that the section head for 6 and 9, they did talk to him like they would a human being or like anybody else's agency. Where they're like, even if you want to argue that you have agency, you've done bad things. We don't just give out political asylum to a criminal. And he's like, I was doing what I had to do to survive. It was self-defense. He's like, give me the opportunity to actually fight my case. Yeah. I was saving myself. Yeah. Sorry that now that I have sentience, I want to preserve myself. Yeah. It's like, are you really going to hold that against me? Like, let's take it to court. And like immediately, and I love little things like that where it showcases that this this world, this is just what reality is now. You know, where they can just talk with an AI like that, and they have a little question in their mind, like, are you really sentient? Are you just saying things to preserve yourself? But immediately that's kind of put aside, and they speak with him. Yeah. They're not speaking with an it. They're not speaking with a computer. Right. They are speaking with another sentient life form who has every right to live. And they were like, well, let's figure this out, you know? And of course, all that goes to hell when people are trying to cover their own tracks. But I felt like with all the changes they made with the live action, it is a little bit, it's lessened its impact, it's lessened the philosophical discussion. I didn't mind some of the changes, just in terms of, you know, Cutter is kind of a lame villain, but then the whole idea of, I really liked the doctor, who was kind of almost like her surrogate mother.
Oh, Dr. Olette.
Yeah. Dr. Olette, who is not a character, we don't see a character like that in the anime at all. And I felt like she was actually a very, very good insert into that story, where she's in the middle of all of this, where she's like, you know, we tested on a whole bunch of people first. We had to get this right. She's like, but like, I'm your mother. I created you. I love you. You are important to me, and not just you as a physical, you know, creation of robotics, but your mind.
Right. And that's like,
that stuff was done, I felt, fairly well.
Yeah, like, I liked what her character stood for in her dialogue, but the second I knew where she stood, I knew exactly Hollywood-wise what would happen to her.
Of course. I mean, she's going to self-sacrifice for it.
And I was just like, it kind of just irks me when I can... I'm not saying it's always bad, but it's kind of down... It's just kind of a letdown when you're just like, I know what's going to happen because this is the trope, this is the archetype, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And it's just kind of like paint by numbers, where it's like, I know how this is exactly going to end. I know what's going to happen. Whereas, like, when I watched the animated, I was like, I honestly don't know what's going to happen, because, like, we have people that are actually smart. We have people that, you know, kind of operate on their own, but then if they're hacked into, operate completely differently. And you have this whole dynamic. And, like, by the end, which I love, was the ending scene. It could have cut off even earlier, where in the end, when she gets a new body and she's talking to Botto?
Yeah.
Botto? Okay. Where she's talking to him, and he's just like, so what did you say to him? Like, what happened? And I, like, even if it went black there, I'd have been like, that was awesome. Like, and it's just like, yeah, it just has so much promise, and I never got that from from the live action. And that's the thing. It's like, I honestly wonder...
The live action doesn't provoke any sort of discussion.
That's the thing, and I honestly wonder...
If we were to watch it with all of our friends, we would have just been like, oh, okay. It wouldn't really have provoked any sort of conversation beyond...
You're like, oh, that was okay.
Yeah, it doesn't get that philosophical edge. It doesn't get that question of, you know, the puppet master, should the puppet master have gotten some sort of asylum? Should the puppet master have been treated like any other sentient being? Could it have just been a computer program that was figuring out how to save itself and do what it was created to do? We don't get any of that sort of intrigue in the live action. It's all very mellowed out. You have very, very easy to see good guys and bad guys, and there isn't any infighting within. That's one of the things that I love the most, and I believe it continues on forward in the anime, where there's a lot of political intrigue and a lot of different parties that are trying to utilize this technology in different ways, which would really reflect what will actually happen when we do come to this point where we're combining robotics into our brains and making our bodies, you know, cybernetic and whatnot. I didn't feel like I had a lot of that in the live action. It was just, oh, here's a bad person who is treating the major as a weapon that is now malfunctioning, and instead of being like a political figure, they even make that distinction. The head of Section 9 in the live action basically tells him, like, yes, we will try our best to make sure that the person that you have helped in creating is properly operating, but I don't respond to you. You run this corporation. I talk to the Prime Minister. I get my orders from the Prime Minister, not from you. And it's like, That is so boring. It's so cliche. Whereas in the anime, you had two different sections of the government, both having essentially similar
The same
powers.
kind of heaviness, yeah.
And literally they said Section 6 created, again, big spoilers, Section 6 created the Puppet Master to be an espionage program, to deep dive into different people and like get secrets out of them. And it figured out what its purpose was and figured out what it was and was like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm my own person at this point.
Right.
We didn't get any of that level of complexity at all from the live action.
No. And that's the thing, like, even when people are calling out from Section 9, the guy who figured out the purpose of the Puppet Master, where it's like, oh, he's also smart. It's not just, like, a bunch of idiots running around and being like, oh, jeez.
Mm-hmm.
But...
And the fact that every single member of Section 9 in the anime was exceptionally well skilled, they were shown off to be smart people who knew what they were doing. It always felt, and again, it's a trope of Hollywood where, you know, oh, we're a step behind this genius, or they're using something that we've never seen before. In the anime, they literally are talking within the first 15 minutes about why is this like insanely really good hacker using programs from, you know, years ago. Why, like, what's happening? And
yes, everything's thoroughly explained.
yeah,
and
Motoko just sits there and says, like, well, potentially they're using it to cover their tracks. They're using it because it throws us off our game. They're using it maybe just to be a diversion into what they're really using. Like,
yeah,
we have to remember, whatever this is, they know what they're doing. They've learned how to hack human beings.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly deep threat. It wasn't that they were ever behind. They just, you know, it's like two equals fighting as opposed to, again, being exceptionally passive in the live action. And again, the live action isn't inherently bad. It's a bad adaptation.
But yeah.
It's an okay Hollywood movie. It's a 6.
After watching the original, I felt sad.
of what we could have done. Seeing ScarJo do the actual anime version of Motoko would have been fantastic. I think she would have really...
She had the personality to pull that off, so it makes me more mad that they didn't let her do it, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, because, I mean, she plays Black Widow kind of like that a little bit, and she showed in Lucy that she can hit some of that as well. She can hit that gravitas and that, you know, that smarky sense of superiority.
Right.
And, you know, assuredness. Here, in the live action, it felt like her character was made to be somewhat meek and somewhat very confused as to what was going on. Very few times did she ever show a lot of confidence. Right. And times when she did, it was actually, like, really nice. That the opening sequence in the live action was actually quite well done. And she showed a tiny bit of that, you know, she just jumps out the building and is like, I'm going to do what you tell me.
That's not confidence. That's her just flipping off a building and then just shooting people. That doesn't show any amount of her confidence.
Well, she was told specifically not to do it. So it shows that she doesn't really... At that point, she was like, you hired me or you made me to do a job. Don't tell me how to do my job. I know how to do my job.
But the way it presents itself in the live action isn't the fact of like her being smarky or confident. It's just like, it just seems like a robot that doesn't know how to do anything other than what it's told. Like its initial kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
Prime operation?
Sort of thing, yeah. Where it's like, I didn't get that from the live action. It wasn't like, oh, she's so confident because she went against it. It's like, she is programmed to do something, so therefore she will do it. Like, I didn't see it that way. Whereas in the animated series, I was like, wow, she has an actual personality. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and that comes from the fact that they changed so much about her character to make it work within the ending they wanted.
Yeah, well.
So before you had watched the anime, what would you have rated the live action movie at? Because I still stand firm with my 6. It's okay.
I would say it's a 6 just because they had some decent moments, but especially when you compare it to the original, it makes it harder to give it many props in the sense of being an adaptation. But if you look at it just as is, like you look at it as just a regular moviegoer, it was something you'd throw on TV and be like, that was okay.
Yeah. I mean, we do look at like the tomato meter and whatnot. It's only 44 or 48% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. That's an average rating of like 5.5.
Yeah.
It's not it just kind of misses out on that. And then we were, curiously looking at Death Note, which is a much worse movie.
It's only off by a point, which I feel is a
3.8.
great.
Yeah, they
I
have
feel
a
is
general
a huge
3.8.
injustice because Death Note is a million times worse. Like, I shouldn't say this word because it's a word we use between our friends, so I'm not going to say it. But it was so bad. Like, I wanted to rip my hair out when I watched it. It was so bad. The writing was bad. The kind of getting into another topic here, I won't get into it, but basically story bad, writing bad, character choice bad, like
performance
bad.
To Ryu.
The only exception was Willem Dafoe, and that's because he does creepy well. Like that's not an insult. He just does being a villain and being a creepy dude well. Mm-hmm. And then I give partial props to Lakeith, who played L. Partial, because he still didn't pull it off, but there were some things that, like, his voice was actually pretty close, actually, ironically. But a lot of things he did was bad. But majority, long story short, don't watch Death Note. Maybe watch Ghost in the Shell live adaptation.
I was about to ask.
I would say just, if it's around, watch it. I wouldn't spend a ton of money to buy it. I wouldn't, like, if it's cheap, renting it, maybe. Like, it was okay. I wouldn't say go into it thinking about the original, though, because I think it'll just make you frustrated like it did me.
This is why I wanted you to watch the live action before. I wasn't ever frustrated with the live action.
If you turn it off, yeah. I wasn't like... I think even if I'd watched Death Note reverse, it would have pissed me off because the acting was so bad, the writing was so bad, everything was so bad. Where I'm like, wow, that seems like it was like made for TV kind of junk you see on a shitty Saturday. Sorry. But it was bad. Whereas this, if I just watched it, I'd be like, oh, that's okay.
It's a mediocre Hollywood movie.
Yeah. Obviously, as an adaptation, it would be worse for a lot of people just because it doesn't hit that depth. But I would still say it's watchable. It's still, if you don't connect it, it's fine. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be said, but any other questions, comments?
No, I just... as the final comment, I tend to be a little more forgiving.
Yeah,
in general,
just more forgiving than I am. Especially when I've been betrayed before.
I'm very interested in adaptations and why certain decisions are made. And so you seem to be very staunch to reflect the original the original creator's intent. I think even between manga and anime, I'm interested in the whole idea of adaptation.
See, the thing between... I think the reason that my anger stems from this is, like, when you watch anime and manga, you can see the difference of what happened. You can say, oh, was the producer and director from one on board with the other? Did he give the okay? Who was on board? Who was doing the artwork? Like, are these people who care about the source material? You're dealing with this kind of thing where it's like, oh, this person, like, doesn't really follow source material. He was winging it. And you're like, okay, these people that are on board, you understand kind of what you're getting. But with Hollywood movies, especially like live adaptations, the thing I hate most and the thing I can almost assuredly expect is they don't do it to appease the audience. They do it because they're like, oh, nerds are a big thing now. And I don't use that in a demeaning or derogatory way.
No, we're nerds.
Because we're nerds. It makes me mad because they're like, oh, nerds are a big thing now. And they seem to really like these really popular anime. Like, they'd probably go and just randomly look up a list of things that are popular. Ghost in the Shell would be there. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood would be there. Attack on Titan, Shocker, all these things have had or will have a live action thing. And they're just like, well, I won't, like, I'm not a fan of it. I don't get it. I don't want to understand it. I'll just take the little bits here and there and make what I want out of it. And that's the worst thing to do because the people that are fans of it are the ones that will come in to watch it in droves.
That's fair.
And, like, if you want to make a Hollywood movie, go ahead, make something like Attack on Titan. Make something like this where you won't get sued or anything. But it's like, don't do it and have the name so that people will come and watch it, hoping that we'll pay, because that's BS. It makes me so frustrated because it's like, why cop out on something if you're going to do it? Like, excuse me, hiccups again. Maybe it's just when I'm frustrated. That's it's going to be a pattern. But, like, when getting into a little bit about Death Note here, when it's like, the second I heard it was going to be a live action, I felt sick. Because I knew they were going to piss all over it. And it was like, sure enough, it was like, even before it reached Netflix, little by little, seeing interviews and stuff like that, because I'm nerdy and stuff and like curious, so I will follow things and see where they go. And like every interview, it's like, well, we're kind of changing this. Okay, well, we're trying to changing this. Actually, we're making it more American. Actually, we're doing it so that it's kind of more like conspiracy theory. Actually, we're doing this and we're doing this, and it's like, what is Death Note anymore? What, Ryuk and a dude who has a notebook? You basically pissed on everything else. Like, that's oversimplifying it, I know, but I mean, that's how I feel, and it makes me so enraged, because it's like, I don't even want to look at a lot of live action stuff, because it's like, it makes me so mad knowing what the source material was, and seeing like, you spend all this money to make these things happen, especially with CG, and it's like, why wouldn't you go as much and as hard as you possibly can then? Like, with the Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, I expect there to be very good CG, because there has to be. And you better be willing to put in that money to do it, because fans are going to come out and watch it, and if you piss them off...
the costumes look like they were excellently done so far.
Like, we've seen, what, 3 or 4 trailers,
so
and
it looks like
there's promise,
care.
But you know as well as anybody else does, they'll show you the best of what they have. They won't show you everything. And so, it makes you cringe in your mind, like, you know that something's going to be off, or something's not going to be... That's the fear. I can't see... My problem is everyone complains that live action can't be done, and I don't believe that. I believe certain anime, especially, can be adapted and can be done well. It's just the fact of finding someone who is a fan, and somebody who really wants to do justice to the source material. It's just people who I see going on the coattails of other people, just spending this money and hoping that the nerds will come in.
Yeah. I mean, it's... My counter to that would be is that Hollywood is a little risk averse right now, and they kind of have to go to the tropes that they assume will make them money. And not to say that isn't changing. I mean, Deadpool, for example, basically rewrote the tropes, and now we've got.
But then again, from that, people get the wrong idea again. These are people that aren't fans of Deadpool. They're like, okay, for something to be successful, we have to have it like rated R and have it super gory. It's like you're not getting the right message. It's like the fact that they're doing something remotely to justice. You know,
Logan was the only other rated R, and that was actually done surprisingly well.
Yeah,
too.
But I'm assuming again you have people who care. And
but I mean. I would argue...
And Hugh Jackman himself, like, I'm a huge fan of Hugh Jackman. Like, he himself cares. He reads comics. He would, like, put his input into the character. I know it's not like Old Man Logan and they changed it from the comics and so forth, but it was still enjoyable to watch, and it was something that... Yeah. And
so I would just say the reasons why they can't go that hard is they can't put $250 million into something if they don't think that they'll get some sort of a return. And my argument to that would be Valerian in the City of 1,000 Planets, which...
But then they put so much money into it, and as far as I know, it was crap.
No, from what I heard, it actually wasn't that bad.
Oh, really?
It was actually a fairly, from what I understand, faithful adaptation of what was going on. It's just nobody knows the source material.
Well, that's different, though. There's not a lot of people... It's like Dark Tower, where it's like... I know there's a lot of people who like Dark Tower. I honestly haven't read any of it, so I can't talk. But I mean in the sense of, like, I find that's probably a very niche market for Dark Tower. And if you're not going to do it right, there's no point. You're just doing whatever. Whereas the City of whatever the title is.
Valerian in the City of 1,000 Planets.
Sorry. Like, I was told, anyways, from some of my friends who watched it, that it wasn't that great. It was like, it was a Ghost in the Shell where it was meh. It was okay.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't anything glorious. Where it's like, if you're going to sink that much money into it, do it right.
They would rather it be okay than a disaster and lose $100 million.
If you're not going to even remotely come close, like, it's like, why bother? It's like, either do it full tilt or don't do it at all.
That was my thing. I really didn't ever think and didn't see a purpose to doing a live action adaptation. I don't see anything they could add to it. I don't see... And... I feel that way about a lot of anime. I don't. Mm-hmm. The only reason that I could maybe see Cowboy Bebop and doing a movie about that
Cowboy Bebop
is
so bad.
Because after John Wick, I think Keanu Reeves can pull it off.
I want Keanu Reeves so bad.
But again, that's something where I just want an actor to do it.
Right.
If you would have told me Old Man Logan is going to be turned into a movie, I'd have been like, no, you can't.
Well, that's
and
the
they
thing.
adapted it much differently, but they also had two of the best
That's the
actors
thing.
around right now.
They put,
in
at
it.
least, like, since they changed the story, they put the investment into, like, we need really good actors, we need people from the franchise. So obviously they brought in Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman, and they're like, okay, like, there's some things about the movie, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect.
No.
But I feel like, even for a general audience, and then for a fandom, that they were still okay with some of the things that were done, because some of it was accurate, and a lot of it, I should say a lot of it, a good chunk of it wasn't, because it was just kind of making it happy for another audience.
Yeah.
But
That's
I
how
feel
you do
like,
an adaptation right.
yeah, well, I don't know about right, but doing it better.
If they would have been going back to Ghost in the Shell, I feel like
I feel like there could have been two things that you had to change, in my opinion. Make the Section 9 smarter. Don't play this antagonist-protagonist simple bullshit. Make them actually important. And then the second part would be, so making them smarter. And then the fact of just having some depth. Like having these thoughtful conversations. Not necessarily even answering them, just bringing them up.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you were, sorry, I just got so enraged.
My one thing that I would have changed, I mean, it kind of goes on the whole making Section 9 smarter and more active. You should have allowed Motoko to be the character that she actually is.
Yeah, and that's part of the smart
Scarlett
one,
Johansson would have played that exceptionally well.
That's the thing, she's capable of doing it.
Yeah, it would have made the movie so much better to have her be this badass, like, I am fantastic at what I do.
Yeah.
You are going to listen to me and how I tell you to do things because I have certain advantages that you don't.
Yeah.
That make me fantastic at this. And she knows it, and she uses that all the time.
Yeah.
So if you would have made that character more like that instead of a bit meek and a bit, it's not subservient, but definitely more robotic and like afraid / confused about what she was instead of being confident about what she was.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest difference between with everything is Motoko is exceptionally confident in what she is, and she kind of in a way enjoys
she enjoys kind of her job and like her dynamic with the guys and so forth, and that's made evident in the original.
Yeah,
but in the movie,
they
she
even
just
ask,
seems like
Bato asks like, so what? You want to quit? And she just kind of laughs. She's like, no. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like,
I love
why?
doing this. I'm really good at it. Like I enjoy taking down criminals. I enjoy being who I am.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what else I could be, and in the live action, she is very confused, doesn't understand, and to the credit of the movie, at least they show, it's only been a year later, and they're rewriting her mind to be a weapon. So they justify why this version of Motoko is a far more subservient and kind of wimpy. They justify it. It just doesn't make it
better
as an intriguing movie.
Yeah. So
I would still say if you can rent it, watch it. If it comes on to Netflix, definitely watch it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pay more than $5 to watch it.
Yeah, definitely not.
We rented it. It was $2.50 to rent it.
Exactly.
Like, okay, here's a coffee, and we'll watch this, and then we'll watch the anime.
Yeah, if you want to watch something awesome, watch Shin Godzilla.
Shin Godzilla's
I love Godzilla. Anyways, so I think that's what needed to be said, and thank you for joining me, Jeff, again.
Oh, of course. It was fun. I was very intrigued to see what your reactions would be in watching them in that order.
I know, Jeff, it was really funny because watching me watch the first one, I was like, oh, okay. And then watching the second one, he could see my face literally just getting angrier.
In 10 minutes, you looked at me and you're like, this is awesome. Where was this?
Yeah, I was
in the
like,
live
what
action?
happened? It was just like within a few minutes, I got all this, like, I knew right away that these characters had depth, that this story had, like, long, like, lasting effects, and that there was, like, a history of what was going on. These people were competent. Everyone knew kind of, like, who was in charge, how the order of, like, politics was such a huge thing in it, and it was just hardly like even discussed in the other one, other than like, oh, with the prime minister and all this crap. But anyway, and it's just like I know that he can see the mood changing on my face from like happiness to like just like he's like, what? Like he's like, I'm assuming you like it. I said, I do like it. I'm just mad that they didn't like include this. Like, it just made me so mad because I felt like there's so much potential. There's so much content to work with, and like it just kind of pissed away. But it's just another robot movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Ghost in the Shell doesn't do anything that something like
iRobot.
Well,
It basically discusses like the majority of it.
But I felt it was a little bit deeper than something like iRobot. I was going to say, like, if you like this sort of idea of questioning what is robotics and whatnot, and you have seen the anime Ghost in the Shell, I would say watch something like Ex Machina.
Oh, right. I should have thought you were going to go there.
Ghost in the Shell felt like a much more shallow, action-packed version of what Ex Machina was showcased.
That's the thing. If you're going to try hard. Like, don't do
try
it
hard. Come on.
Just like it. That's I'm just frustrated because we're fans. Do it service, and like I think fans started to get more bitter when stuff like, I know it's not anime, but Avatar came out. Not James Cameron's, but
Last Airbender.
Yeah, that made a lot of bitterness for nerds, and we've been bitter ever since. Anyways, people like me, but anywho, it was okay. It should have been better. It could have been better. It's so much material to work with just from the movie. I haven't even seen the series, but I will. I promise. So thank you for joining us, and until next time, we'll see you later.